Hello, this is Ravon Snujan for Self-Taught Polyglot. So today I'm going to be talking about why two official languages in Haiti. First and foremost, we need to make the distinction between official languages and national languages. Official languages are languages that are recognized by the state. For example, in Haiti, we have French and Haitian Creole. They're recognized in the Haitian Constitution. Whereas a national language are languages that are used in a nation, on a territory, due to a lot of communities that take part in this larger nation. For example, Australia is made up of a lot of national languages: Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, Portuguese, Italian. All these languages are part of Australia. There are a lot of communities where these languages are spoken. So before answering the question why two official languages in Haiti, let's illustrate some of the points, some of the factors that keep the Haitian Creole from becoming an official language in Haiti, and still that is part of the Haitian mindset that enslaving them from using Creole in order to emancipate themselves to be a better nation. The first thing is that until the new Haitian Constitution in 1987, the Haitian Creole was considered as just a dialect from the French language. People just use it. They just use it whenever they have a conversation, an ordinary conversation with common people in the street, their family, etc. Whenever it's something that is very serious, they don't use the Haitian Creole language, because it has a linguistic inferiority to it. One of the things is that the Haitian Creole has no prestige, right? It had no prestige back in the 20th century. Whenever you use Creole, people are not going to be interested in what you're saying. It has no prestige. In order to say something and it has prestige in it, so that it can be very prestigious, you have to use the French language. And then it seems to a lot of people, the Haitian Creole, it seems to a lot of people there, it is primitive due to a lot of, the grammatical structures and the lexicology, the morphology of the language, which borrows a lot of different style, different structures from French and other languages. It seems very, very primitive to a lot of people. Let's take an example. If you're comparing the Haitian Creole to French, morphological speaking, for example, you take the morphologies of verbs. In Haitian Creole, there is no variations in the morphemes, in the flexions of the verbs, whereas in French there's a flexion, the varieties of the verbs, in order to make different tenses, mood, aspects, and voice of the verb. For example, let's take the verb in French, and the verb manger, to eat. In English we say I eat, you eat, she eats, it eats, he eats, etc. In Haitian Creole, there's no variations in the verb. The verb stays the same, manger. And in order to express the mood, the tense or the time, they use other morphemes that are invariable to the verb. For example, in present we say apé, moi apé manger, I'm eating or I eat. Past, I ate. And in Creole we say moi t'ai mangé, t'ai, which is different from the verb, which is different from the verb. It is not considered to be part of the verb. So if you're trying to see all these things, all these different linguistic morphological differences between French and Haitian Creole, you tend to think that Haitian Creole is not a standard language. Remember what I said in my previous videos about standard language, that a language happened to be standard not because of its own factors, the internal factors of the language, but because of some exterior factors like politics, economy, and law, right? And one of the things that is very important when it comes to Haitian Creole, that keeps Haitian Creole from becoming completely official still in Haiti right now, is that the prejudice and the discrimination people have against the language. First, let's tackle prejudice. The prejudice is different from discrimination. Is that when you're prejudiced against something, generally it's a thought, right? It's a thought processing. Let's take, for example, whenever you go somewhere and you're using Creole in order to communicate, to convey a message, using Creole, people are not going to take you seriously because you use Creole. Whereas if you use French, people are going to take you seriously even though that there is no depth to what you're saying, right? Because you're using French, so it's a fairy tale, yada yada yada, right? It's totally different. The prejudice is basically the thought, right? The thought processing. People is just enslaved in the thought, the mind, right? Whereas people do it subconsciously, right? They don't even think about it. It just comes naturally. You have to develop yourself enough and not to think with prejudice against something, especially the Haitian Creole language. The second thing is that it's discrimination that is very, very, very in vogue right now. Still now, it's in vogue with discrimination against the national tongue, the vernacular language of a country. Is that discrimination is mostly about the action that are taken, actions that are taken against the usage of this code that is the Haitian Creole language. Let's take an example that is very important. In an office, like if you just want to go to office, if you use French, people are going to take you seriously. But if you use Creole, people might say that you have to express yourself, you have to speak, right? So you have to speak French to people, especially in offices. If not, they if you don't do that, they won't take you seriously. And let's take an example that I went through when I was in classic school. I went to Catholic schools and monk schools, and mostly before a school called the Heart of Jesus Christ, you say Cœur de Jésus in French. So before this school, even though the school they still had the same dynamics of using Creole, of banning Haitian Creole in the school and using French, it was not successful, but they tried it. But before in the Catholic school that I went, they use objects. Whenever you use Creole, communicating with a professor, a teacher, or a personnel in the school, they give you an object as a form of punishment because you use your mother tongue, the language of your mother and your father. See, so they give you this object, and as a punishment, you can stay in retention for a couple of hours there. They can give you biblical passages for rote learning. You're just gonna learn them by heart, or you can copy some lines with a sentence with the most famous sentence: "Je ne dois pas utiliser le créole ou parler le créole haïtien en salle de classe," which means I must not use Haitian Creole in the classroom. It is a stupid idea of blocking people from using their native tongue, language that is used in their family, in their home. It is very, very stupid, and a stupid idea and an outlandish idea of using of blocking people, of banning people, of preventing people using their native tongue, because most of the thing that people can actually learn, they're going to be learning it much faster in their native tongue.